Hello, class, and welcome to Unit 1 of Review. We'll be talking about Unit 1, and we'll be talking about, most importantly, the creative project. We're going to get off to a little bit of a slow start with some of the other professors joining us as soon as they're able. Professor McClellan ought to be here momentarily. But as a reminder, we are open in Piazza, and you can ask us questions about anything that concerns you about the unit, anything that concerns you about logistics, any content that isn't making sense to you, or if you just have questions about your creative project. Similarly, we'll be going over the creative project and talking about some strategies to deal with that. As a reminder, Unit 1 is due tomorrow at 11:59. So if you have questions, go ahead and put those in the forum. Let me just check and make sure we're set up here. Okay, seems like we're in good shape. And I think Professor McClellan is hanging around here somewhere. I'll just check with him. Okay, so Unit 1 is about musical sounds. And so far, if you've been keeping up with the work, you've learned how to identify the difference between musical sounds and non-musical sounds. You've seen how the staff works. You understand the octave and how to divide the octave. Most importantly, with the division of the octave is those enharmonic notes, notes that are written differently but sound the same. Those will be especially important when you deal with scales, which is coming up in Unit 3 very quickly. And they'll be also very important when you work on your creative project too. Hold on, I'm getting a request for a link from Professor Levesque. Let me just pass that in. There we go. Oh, we seem to have Professor McClellan here now.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, hi, Robin. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
And I do not hear you. So you can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me, and I can hear you, which hopefully means all the students can hear us as well, all the fellow travelers. We're going over and talking about some of just the basics of the unit. And really, what's most important that you get out of this unit is to be able to really effectively and quickly read notes on the staff, both in treble and bass clef. And if you take a look at the core concepts exam from later on, you'll notice that the big emphasis of that exam in terms of Unit 1 is simply just basic note identification. So that's really the thing we need to take away from this, being able to read in treble and bass clef. So feel free to jump in, fellows, talk about anything you want to talk about with Unit 1, and we'll be monitoring questions, so please ask them. Okay, we have a question here before we go on any further.
Can you hear me with the headphones? Can you still hear me now?
I can still hear you, but it sounds like
Okay.
a gnome is like.
Yeah, it does. We have a gnome in the system.
Oh, it's Professor Levesque with the gnome today.
That's her little Beck's voice.
It sounds like Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, that's usually because of bandwidth issues. Tries to.
Now he's vanished. Good
No,
God. Oh.
I'm not sure that I have that.
That is funky.
I know. I wish. I think it might be better for him to stop talking for a second because it's kind of hilarious. It's trying to catch up to him. Is there a difference between B and C and E and F, a half step or a whole step? Is the difference between B and C and E and F a half step or a whole step? You want to handle that, Robin?
Good question. Those are the two places where it's a half step and not a whole step. Semitone, not a whole tone. And if you memorize that, it will really, really help you navigate everything. And there's a sort of a built-in problem with the staff, which is that all the notes on the staff visually are the same distance apart. But actually, in those two places, they're actually closer together on the keyboard, on the piano keyboard, and in the way they sound. So it's a little misleading the way the staff is designed, and that's something you have to get used to as a music theory student. Don't forget where those two spots are, because it'll throw you off in a lot of ways later when you're doing scales and everything.
So why do you think the keyboard itself is designed the way it's designed? Why do you think, if it's confusing that the half steps appear that way at E and F and C and B, why didn't they just do all running black, white, black, white, black, white?
It actually, if you think about it, it makes it easier to know where you are on the keyboard because it's asymmetrical. You have those two spots that aren't quite the same. So if it were just the same all up and down, you would just have this back and forth, back and forth. It would be impossible to know where you are. So that's one reason.
Keyboards could hide.
There's a more sort of music sound and music-related reason, which is that if you play the notes from C up to C, the white notes form a major scale. So the keyboard is built to play a major scale by default. So that's another reason. You can play all sorts of other major scales, as you're going to learn in Unit 3, but the keyboard is designed around music theory, and that's why it's such a good map for studying music theory. So we highly recommend in all of this, even if you're not a piano player, get to know the way the keyboard works. It's kind of like the geography of music theory. You can visualize. I still do this when I'm trying to figure out a chord. Like I picture the keyboard in my head, and that really helps me figure out where the notes are.
We've got a great question here from Thomas. I've gone through all the units and done all the homework assignments, but I'm a super beginner, which is fine, when it comes to music, and I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with the first creative project. That's totally understandable.
Yes, it is.
I'm just not sure where to start my melody. Do you have any advice?
That's a great question.
A very good question.
Yeah, and I bet you're not the only person feeling that way, so I'm really glad you asked that.
Yeah, and it kind of leads into really the point, since we're not really doing a test for this unit until the core concepts exam. Really the big item in this unit that's going to vex people the most is the creative project, which is where I think we should spend the most of our time.
Mm-hmm.
So does anybody have some good advice for Tom? Is it Thomas or Tomas? I can't remember.
You're still.
You're still very funny.
It's so comical that you almost couldn't make it up.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Thomas.
It's too bad though, because we don't want to.
Yeah. What happens when
Dr. Lebec always has good things to say. I wonder if we can.
Well, he'll try to log back on, but when a bandwidth gets slow, one of the ways that the software solves that problem is by kind of cutting back the audio.
Yeah.
The audio just like an MP3, and it turns into something like that. Whoa.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, but I think he's trying to
start a separate call.
Yeah.
Maybe if you hang up on a call, you can't rejoin.
I don't know.
Students, I hope you're enjoying us navigating technology.
It's fun.
This course is all built on technology, and we're pretty old, but we're young enough to understand technology. We like to think.
We don't understand it. We just know how to abuse it.
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we, Craig? Did you want to take a stab at? Well, let's see what do you sound like.
How does it sound?
Oh, you're human again.
Yeah.
That's actually
like a gnome there for a while. You're going to steal my socks or something.
That's sadly disappointing. It was adding some much-needed levity to the situation, I think.
Yeah.
It was.
So do you someone want to take a stab at Thomas's question about how to start his melody?
Could you remind me what the question specifically was?
Well, he's worked through the entire unit, but he's, as a complete novice, he's kind of at a loss for how to start his melody.
Okay, well, what I would do is I would first identify one of the basic structures of a good melody, which is sort of the arc, the high point and the low point. So one of the things you can do if you're a very beginner is just to picture your melody as having a definite shape, either high then low, maybe low then high, but something that isn't just a flat line. And sometimes by looking at it and thinking about the shape ahead of time, it can help you guide where the notes go. You're going to start on a note and probably end on the same note, but you may find yourself going up, down, and following that shape in the middle. So rather than think about what my next note is going to be, it can help to think about what you want the overall shape to look like, and then match the notes to mix up with it, to make the shape that you've predetermined.
That's a good suggestion.
Great idea.
Yeah, I'd use it. You know, and I always find repetition works well in connect. I mean, these are all kind of additive. You can do some or all of these, but I tend to like, you know, repeating the same melodic idea, maybe not at the same pitch level, but at maybe a higher and higher or lower and lower pitch levels. It's called a sequence. But I find that kind of repeating materials and trying to be very economical with my materials also gives me a lot of ideas. Once I key in on that one little bit that I like, well, then I just repeat it and I really work from that kernel.
I would also add that Dr. Lebec may have already said this. I was double tasking on another question, but in general, it's good to have melodies be mostly made up of steps with relatively fewer leaps or skips. So if you, in general, keep the next note that you do one step away, like the next line or the next space, and then once in a while throw in a leap where it jumps further, that can be a good general melodic principle.
And when you do throw in those leaps, one thing that we see a lot in tonal music is that the leaps are compensated by motion in the other direction. Mm-hmm. So if you leap up high, often then the melody comes back down low. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you leap down low, you'll often find the melody walking back up to compensate for the big skip. And these are things if you listen to melodies, these are things that melodies will often do. These aren't rules that someone just made up and said, hey, I'm going to make some arbitrary rules for a melody. These are rules that people deduced after the fact after listening to many good melodies.
That's a great point. And as an add-on to that, that also means that you can trust your instincts. Like if it sounds good to you and it sounds like it flows naturally, you're probably onto something good. Like it's not something where you have to feel like you have to follow all these technical rules and only think about that. Also remember that this is a melody and it should sound natural, and you're a human and therefore you understand melodies already instinctively, and your instincts are good and you should follow them.
So if I'm just going to move on to just to keep us moving, because
of course,
quite a few questions coming in here.
Which is great, by the way.
I'm going to respond to Vincent's, even though I did it here already. But Vincent recorded his melody with a microphone on his laptop, but he was playing on a separate electronic keyboard, not on the pop-up piano. You know, that is totally fine. The pop-up piano, when we made it, was pretty good, but it's nowhere near even the best pop-up piano you can find. The real key is, and we don't care if you sing, we don't care if you hum or whistle, the key is that we want you to actually perform your melody in some form. We don't want you to put it into a notation program and have that program play it back for you and then send us a recording of a computer playing your tune. We want to hear you making actual musical sounds in some fashion. And if you feel like you can get a better quality sound out of an instrument or out of your voice, by all means, do whatever you think works the best. But that's a great question, one we get all the time. Sharon, and I'll let somebody else handle this one, but Sharon writes, since there are no bar lines in this creative project, do we treat one entire line of the staff as one bar? I have numerous accidentals in my melody, and I'm wondering if I need to add multiple naturals after adding a sharp or flat. Another excellent question.
Definitely. I'm happy to. There's sort of two questions there. In fact, I got a similar question several times by email, so I'm glad this is coming up. I think a lot of people are wondering about the rhythm element. So one thing to keep in mind is that everybody's coming in at with different levels of musical experience. And some of you have already studied rhythm, and you know what time signatures and measures are. But officially, according to this class, none of you know about that yet. We haven't gotten to it yet. So we treat this assignment as if you've never even heard of that stuff. So if you have heard of it, that's great. But just kind of leave it out for now, and you can play the melody with a rhythm. It can sound like it has a rhythm, but you just don't have to notate it. So you can just put the pitches one after the other, and it can just be one long bar with no bar lines, and that's fine. And does somebody else want to jump on the one about accidentals?
Yeah, I think in general, if you're unsure, then you can just put a little note in that says accidentals only affect the notes they immediately precede. So I think clarity is the rule of the day. Mm-hmm. And if you're worried that we will misunderstand something, just write a note. Like I said, it says accidentals only affect the note they immediately precede. That way you don't have to clutter things up with a whole bunch of accidentals. Mm-hmm. For those of you guys who don't know, what the student is referring to is the fact that accidentals generally only are effective on the notes until the next bar line. So if you had an F sharp, for example, that F sharp would cease to exist at the bar line, and then it would become an F natural again. But with no bar lines, theoretically, then the F sharp would continue for the length of the duration of the piece. But that is maybe a little unrealistic given that you're doing something without rhythm. So, like I said, try and be clear, and if you're not sure that we will understand, just write a short note.
And it looks like the next question is kind of related to this in the sense that it says, Karen says, how do you put pauses on the sheet music, on the music sheet? Yes. Great question. I think you're talking about rests, which again are in the next unit. So officially, as far as this course is concerned, nobody knows what a rest is yet. I know many of you do, and that's great. So basically, if you want to pause in your melody as you're performing it, that's fine. Don't feel like you have to keep playing the entire time, but you just don't have to notate those. You could maybe put a little space if you want to. Again, it's sort of all about clarity in your way. As long as you can portray clearly what your intention is somehow, that's the goal.
Okay, so I'm going to again move on, and we have a kind of we've talked about some of these issues, but the next question brings up a few more. My question might be a little off the topic. This is from Kronol. Oh, pardon me if I'm not saying that right. My question might be a little off the topic, but is it only me or many students having difficulty with homework and project? I'm not sure how to start with melody. I'm brand new to music, so I have no idea in music, no knowledge in music, and think the class is going too fast. Is this class easier on campus than online? Well, maybe Professor Lebec can talk about that because he can teach us online and on face-to-face.
I actually think the class is a little bit harder face-to-face because there's more of a chance that you will fall behind in class and not be able to review as much as you can online. One of the advantages of the online section is that if you're not getting homework 1, you can ask a bunch of questions and go back and redo homework 1 a bunch of times. You can't really do that as effectively in a lecture. If you miss something in a lecture, you have to then try and get the teacher for office hours, in which case you may be competing with 40 other students looking for office hours to get that work done again or corrected and to redo assignments. So in terms of the comparison, I do actually think the online course is a little bit easier in that respect. In terms of it moving too fast, I think that this first unit can come up on you pretty quick if you've never done music before. What I've found in my experience is the first 2 units are actually the hardest for new students, the pitch and the rhythm. And so what I would say, just keep plugging away. If you can get through these first 2 units, I think you're going to find your comfort level really, really improves fast. Past that, I would say, make sure you send lots of questions with screenshots. If you don't, you got something wrong, take a screenshot of it, send it to your professor with a question. They can explain a little better. And just remember, you can keep redoing those assignments and keep trying them with feedback until you get the right answers, until you understand the material.
He also wants to, again, similarly, he's worried about how to start his melody. So does anybody want to review some of the things we said? Or because I think a lot of people are having this, they kind of get to that project and they're like, oh, I don't know how to start this melody, or I don't know what they're looking for. And I think part of it is we're not really looking for anything. We want you to write a melody that sounds good to you. Write a set of pitches together that sounds reasonable and interesting and logical to you. And really, the main part of this is not the how pretty the melody is you've written, or it's not how well you perform it. What's really important is whether or not you've thought about it while you're doing it. So the analysis essentially wants to hear your thought process. Why did you choose to use this note here? Or what's interesting about the melodic shape that you've created? What's interesting about your steps? What's interesting about your leaps? We just essentially want to hear what went through your head while you were thinking about this melody. Well, I was going for something that sounded angry, so I thought maybe having some leaps and some, semitone motion, movement by semitone sounded really jarring to me. So I used those to kind of communicate that. So we want you to write something that works for you, but describe what you're writing. Just talk us through your thought motion, just so you're not writing just randomly and having no connection to what you're trying to create. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Or
do you think it would be helpful if I actually just kind of did one right now?
Yes.
Just kind of, okay,
Yeah.
let me. I'm pulling up a little Sibelius thing here that I can sort of imitate what we're going to do. Just give me 1 second. It won't look exactly like it'll look on your page, but so let me get my characters up and then I can screen share.
Sure.
And I will pretend to be a young, impressionable youth.
I was going to add something quick while you're getting it set up about sort of your process approaching these melodies. One thing you could try, if you have access to a piano or electronic keyboard, or something like Soundtrap, which has like an online keyboard that you can play your computer keys, and then literally just like noodle around and plunk your fingers on notes and don't even think about it. Just sort of let your fingers do the walking and see what sounds good. And then if you start to repeat a pattern, you might find you start to like repeat a few notes, then try to remember them, write down the letter names, and then go over to the staff on the creative project assignment and put those letter names in, and that's a way you can kind of get going initially.
And Professor Levine works on bringing Sibelius up. We have a question from Sharon. For the melody analysis, it states that we need succinct answers. However, if I write about a paragraph for a question, such as question 5, will I get points taken off? No, absolutely not. We just don't want, a random, rambling craziness. Just say what you have to say and be done with your description. But if you write, we're not going to mark you down for stuff like that. And that kind of goes on with Karen's question. Will you guys have a little leniency on the first project in this course? Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is the rubric we lay out is very specific, and we're going to follow the rubric. But really, if you go through and you follow the directions, you won't have any trouble. Again, we're not looking for you to be Mozart or baby Beethoven's or anything like that. We just want you to play around with music and give us your thoughts. To follow the directions and watch the rubric, and you should be fine. And we understand that this is your first project, so as we are grading these, I'm sure we'll be conferring among each other to make sure that it's a fair and equitable assignment.
In general, this course is designed to give you maximum control as the student over the outcome. Like, you can always do things many times, you can be methodical and take your time, and so we try to really put it in your hands, like how well you do. Like, if you follow the directions and you complete all the work, you're going to do well in the course. That's kind of the rule of thumb, and that applies to the creative project too. And
I'm just going to throw this in before Dr. Levesque starts. Sharon follows up. She says, almost all the questions pertain to the emotion that the melody evokes. Could I also discuss the character of the piece? Absolutely. That's really what we want you to be thinking about. What type of character you're trying to capture. And the questions essentially are prompting you to think about how the notes you're putting on the page, how the notes you're choosing, can affect the character or how you'd like them to affect the character. We want you to think about what you've done, and it's not so much what you've written, but how you talk about and think about what you've written. And you can even say, you know, I had in mind that this would be angry, but it didn't work out. So perhaps if I had done this or that or these things had been different, I would have come to a different answer. That's perfectly valid. You're perfectly willing to say, you know, I was going for this, but I didn't really capture it. I didn't really get there. Do you want to run us through a melody, Craig?
Sure. Why not? Let me do a screen share. Let me know if you can. Okay. Can you see what I'm doing? Oh, okay. So can everyone see me?
Yeah, but if you could make your staff a little bigger, and I'm going to just mute Robin and me so we don't inadvertently switch the screen.
Got it. Okay, so I'm using a notation program, Sibelius, to try and imitate what we would be doing. It's not an exact duplicate, but you can see roughly what it might look like on the tool. Okay, so I have starting. Let me just do one thing here. There we go. So I have my starting tools. I have my sharp, my flat, my natural. So my sharp, my flat, my natural, and my note head. And I'm going to start just by thinking about the general shape and character that I want my melody to be. And so I'm going to arbitrarily decide that I want to have a sad and somber melody. That seems to be a lot of what we're getting these days. And maybe I want to do a melody that kind of starts high and goes down low before coming back up high again. So that was an accident. Sorry. So I'll start over here. I'm going to have to do a little bit of fancy footwork to imitate what we would do for ledger lines. Bear with me a moment. And I've started up here. I'm going a little lower. I think I'd like to go down one more note. Coming back up.
Just want to point out one thing, if I can, as Dr. Lebec works, take note of how nicely aligned the notes are vertically. You can tell what all of them are, and if one of them got just a little too high or too low, it might be like, is that a B or a C, and you're not really sure. So it's important to take care with placement of where the notes are.
Okay, and so you started out with a basic concept of in the middle, going low. I jumped up, I noodled around here a little bit, then I worked my way back down. Some of the accentals I added to make the half steps because I wanted to have a sort of a dark, more somber feeling, so I put a half step here, half step motion here from the D flat to the C to the B to the C. Stephen earlier mentioned maybe having repeated melodic fragments. I have this fragment D flat C B here, so it might be neat actually if I tried using a D flat up here also, so now I have another C, B, D flat, C, and those kind of repeated things can help a melody, you know, actually sound pretty good and have a more consistent sound to it. Now, do I have enough notes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Not really, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to pretend that I need just a couple more because I want to do the bass clef transposition part also. I'm going to start where I ended on G. And there's my first melody. So
that's also a good principle is to start and end on the same note. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, please do. So you can see that I started with my general idea of starting in a mid place, going low, jumping high, and swinging around. I used a lot of half steps to try and get that dark, somber feeling. But at the same time, you can see, or also you can see that it is predominantly steps with just a few skips. I have a skip down here, a big skip up there, then small skip here, then a lot of stepwise motion, skip, a skip. Generally speaking, you don't want to see a melody that jumps up, down, all over the place, because that does not usually make for a cohesive melodic line. Now, when I transpose this down an octave, I have to remember that middle C is right here on the treble clef, and middle C is right here on the bass clef. So this would be the G above middle C. To move it down an octave, I'm going to move it to the G below middle C. And I'm just going to recreate this melody exactly. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. Down one octave. It's not a different melody. It's the same melody an octave lower. Whoops, actually I won't need ledger lines, will I? My lucky day. And I can keep track of where I am if I line them up top to bottom. Not always possible to do with the staff tools we have, but I can do it here. I'm going a little fast, I realize, to try and get it all through, but hopefully you're getting the basic idea. This is also a program I know and use on a daily basis, so I can do things faster than I'll be able to do. Okay, and then here's my melody in the 2 octaves. In the treble where I originally composed it, then the exact same melody an octave lower. The last step would be to, pardon for a minute, to play it and record it on the piano. Hopefully you can hear that. I did that on my keyboard just here in front of my desk, but that would have been the recording I had made. I did the bass clef version, I think. Then I would have submitted this as a screenshot along with the recording I just made, and that would be the written part of that and the recorded part. Then in terms of the other things, the essay questions, I might start by saying that about my general intent was to make a somber melody with this kind of shape. Specifically, I'm using these half steps down here in order to get that somber feeling. The overall shape, I tried to keep it, I should say, dark and somber without being angry or aggressive, mostly stepwise with a couple skips. I can try to answer some more of the questions, but I have to take a look at the rubric first before I dive into more specifics. Do you guys want to jump in and add anything?
Yeah, I have some questions I want to ask. Describe the emotional effect of your melody, intended emotional effect. Were you trying to compose a melody that was angry, dramatic, amorous, or something else?
I was trying to compose a melody that was somber and a little mellow. I don't think I completely succeeded because the octave skip in the middle actually does not portray what I wanted it to portray. In the future, when trying to write a somber melody, I would probably not jump quite so high. And I also think keeping it in a lower register and not making the big jump up as I did took away from some of the somber effect I was looking for.
Yeah, it was a little more melancholy, maybe.
Right.
A little more. Yeah. Discuss how your choices of pitch relate to the emotional intent of your composition. Be as specific as you can, high versus low. And you've kind of been talking about some of it.
I specifically chose half steps in multiple instances, G to F sharp, D flat, C, B, to try and convey that feeling of somberness. And I went low initially to try and support that as well. But as I mentioned earlier, I undercut my own intent a little bit by jumping up into the higher register in the second half. But specifically, the half steps that I used were the way I intended to show that somber melody. For those who have a little more music theory, I also chose to stick within a collection that sounded like a certain minor key. It's similar to G minor. And so that was another conscious choice.
Makes sense to me.
Octatonic. kind of octatonic more than minor, but
What emotions do? Let's see. What emotions do leaps express compared to steps? Does the size of the leap play in this role? So, what in terms of the leaps and the steps you use, do they affect the emotional state? You think positively or negatively? And I think you've been sort of discussing that in particular
right.
with the leap.
Right, the half-step leaps I think enhanced the effect I was going for, but the octave leap I used in the middle I think took away from the effect. That larger leap of the octave I think actually made it a little less effective. If it had been a smaller leap or a leap of an interval not an octave, then I think I could have gotten a better effect. But the octave itself sounded too stable to convey any sense of angst.
Yes, I agree with that. What emotions do... Now, we're talking about this maybe a little more sophisticatedly, with a little more experience than you would, but we want you to follow your instincts. In some ways, even though our instincts are informed by, taking lots and lots of courses in this and writing a lot of music, we still, as composers, we're still following our inner ear. We're still following our instinct. So if something doesn't quite make sense to you, or if you feel like something isn't working, just tell us what you think. Don't feel like you have to say something very grand or very specific. Just answer the question as best you can. What emotions do your ascending melodic movements express versus your descending movements? So definitely, you have that big leap up. What does the kind of the fall down say to the listener?
The fall down is a compensation for the big leap up, and I wanted to show a falling down emotionally from that high point. So the leap up was the high point, and the fall down, I think, was trying to show a descent back towards the beginning in that lower register.
Excellent. How do these factors, what we've discussed in questions 2 to 4, work together through the span of your whole melody? Think about the 4 categories: ascending leap, ascending step, and what emotional effect does each one have, and whether the specific distance between a given pair of notes plays a role in the emotional effect.
I think the descending nature of the melodic line in the beginning and after the big leap, combined with the half-step motion, does have the effect of making the music seem darker and more somber and more serious.
Excellent. Does your melody have distinct sections? If so, how many? Which notes belong in each section?
Hold on one second. I think there's an initial section here before the big skip. A second section that is almost an octave descent from the C, D flat down to the D. And then a final section here, which is a closing segment that seems to signify the end of the melody.
Yep. I would also, I don't know what Professor McClellan thinks, but I would also agree with your assessment. But again, this is just, when you do this, you just look at your melody and see if there's some spots where you feel like it naturally breathes. Like if you were to sing this, where would you breathe? And that's usually, you find yourself breathing where the kind of the melody will break in natural places and natural shapes. Do you think your melody fully achieved your intended emotional effect?
No, I don't think it did, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, specifically with the octave leap and the register change.
But don't you feel like you should tell us it did so that we'll give you a better grade?
No. I want to be honest, and I want to accurately reflect on what I did so that I can do a better job next time.
And we're going to give you a better grade if you are honest.
Right. And I'll bring an apple to put on my teacher's desk. And
we don't want you to hear, oh my God, this was perfect, and I did amazing, and I captured it exactly. Well,
I am a god among men.
No, I mean, Tchaikovsky, whatever, can do what he wants to. But for the rest of us, it's hard to capture throbbing emotions like that very clearly. So we'll do our best and we'll move on. And this is about playing, but very conscious playing. We're really thinking about what we're doing. And I just want to thank Professor McClellan for developing these questions. I think they're really well conceived.
Okay. Shall I stop screen sharing?
Yeah, why don't we flip back to the see where the questions are at. Thanks, Craig. That was really great.
No problem.
I like your little melody too. I think you should save it for.
Too late. Closed without saving.
Oh,
That's. Oh, I can always go back and look on the YouTube capture if needed.
makes it sad. Yeah, I have individual students who'd like to share their projects beforehand with their faculty person. I think that's fine. If you want your teacher to take a look at what you're doing and make sure it's on target, just make sure that you send to the right instructor, and that make sure you check the syllabus. There's 3 of us, but you can't just send everything to me or to Professor McClellan or to Professor Levesque. Send it to the instructor you have, and make sure you note just saying, I'd like you to take a quick look at it. And they might say, please go ahead and submit it on time anyway. And then if you need to make adjustments, that you can work out the details for resubmitting later. Does everyone kind of agree with my feeling on that?
Yes.
I got cut out, so I didn't hear the whole thing.
But pretty much, if a student wants you to take a look at the project in advance, you're happy to do that. But they should make sure they turn their assignment in on time. And if you have suggestions you want them to implement, then they can always resubmit.
And if you send it to me like the day of or that evening, I may not have time to get to it before the deadline.
Which is why why they might want to resubmit.
Yeah.
But just make sure we know that that's why you're sending it, that you want us to take a look. Karen wants to know what to do if she wants to play an A and an E at the same time. How do you put that on the staff?
I would say that for this assignment, stick to one note at a time, just because it's in the spirit of the assignment. In the future assignments, you'll have a chance to do harmony. Remember, many of you will have the urge to be even more creative than the assignment allows for, which is wonderful, and we want to encourage that. But remember that this is still a technical assignment in a sense, so there are certain limits that we keep on it to make it uniform across what everybody's doing, and that has a kind of value in as a teaching tool. So. But we hope that all of you will become professional composers and be inspired and go create crazy symphonies with huge chords of 12 notes and so on. So we're not trying to stop you. We just for this assignment we need to put some limits.
Yeah. Thomas asks, when we move our composition down one octave, we're just doing what we did for part 2 of the homework, number 7 for the entire melody. And I believe that is correct. We're just dropping the melody, rewriting the melody out down an octave. And this is just to test your ability to transpose and to essentially think of notes in different octaves. And I did get another question, because this kind of relates to pitch class, and note. We've introduced those terms as with pitch. We said that's just a note kind of as you hear it in nature. But as a pitch, just as a musical sound as you hear it in nature. But with the note is notes on a staff specifically. But this person wants to know what tone would refer to that. If we're making the distinction between pitch and tone.
It's a very good question. I think it basically means the same thing as note. Would you guys agree?
I mean, tone has, the problem is if you've got a little bit of musical experience, tone has a lot of other connotations also.
Yeah.
And people talk about tone quality or tone color, and they're talking about the actual, what we would call the timbre of the sound. So in some ways, those terms are all synonymous, but in actual practice, when people talk about a note, they don't often say tone. They might say the tone of the person's voice, or the tone of that particular instrument. So they are the same, but in actual practical usage, I don't often hear tone used that way. But for the purpose of the course, is it identical?
I think I just ran out of words to use.
We were trying to mix it up. We were trying to keep it interesting.
I was trying to keep it really clear with pitch and note, because I feel like those are. But tone is one of those kind of flexible words.
Right.
I think it's worth mentioning another terminology thing, which is in the course we use semitone and whole tone, and those, in that case, it refers to the distance between two pitches. But then also many people use half step and whole step, and I want to point out that those mean exactly the same thing as semitone and whole tone. They're literally just two ways of saying the same thing. So if you are used to saying half step and whole step, that's fine.
Okay, so we're kind of reaching the end here, but as always, we like to kind of open things up. So I've posted a link to Google Hangouts. If you've got a Google Hangout account, you can jump in and join us and ask your question live, but if we don't get any takers by 8:50, oh, sorry, I'm on a different coast than you. I guess it's getting really late. What is it, 10:50 there almost? If we don't get any takers in the next couple of minutes, we'll close it off and call it an evening. And it's been a great, lively time with all of your super questions here.
Yeah, we love getting all these questions because it really helps us focus on what people need. And while we're waiting, I just want to also point out that Piazza is a great place for all of you to ask your questions. We're happy for you to email us, but often if you ask a question on Piazza, you may get a quicker answer because another professor sees it before your professor does, or maybe another student sees it and they know the answer. And it's also a place that you can ask questions about the material if you just want to bounce some ideas off your classmates. You know, you can't share actual answers to homeworks, but you can certainly share, you know, your knowledge and your background and your insights about the material, and it can be a kind of meeting place for that. So.
We actually have a question here from not in the same forum, but I think it's something we could mention. The Dropbox for all the creative projects is not right in the assignment, which is one of the peculiarities of eCollege. But if you look on the top navigation in eCollege, you'll see the word Dropbox, and if you click there, there's a drop-down menu where you can select the particular assignment you want to submit for. So in the top, on the top navigation, on the right is where it is, and maybe I'll send out an announcement about that just in case it's confusing. I have a question here from not in the same forum I mentioned. We've got our joiner.
Oh, excellent.
Well, I'd like you to turn off you're like you've joined a radio call and left your radio on. So let's see how we're doing.
Looks like
I didn't actually mean to mute him. I was just trying to.
Can we unmute?
It doesn't seem to want to unmute. Oh, I think he left.
Oh. Come back. We'd love to talk to you. Maybe it was a bad connection.
Yeah.
That is a good point, though. If you do want to call, you either have to put the headphones on or turn your local speakers off. Otherwise, we're going to get a lot of a lot of junk in there.
If you're listening through through Piazza, and you log in as well, then you know you're gonna. I was starting to hear myself like a minute behind. So I think
you may want to close out of Piazza and then join the call.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I think maybe we've hit our limit here with in terms of.
Yeah, us East Coasters are hitting our bedtime.
Yeah, and my dinner time is, well, I need to go downstairs and have dinner.
We wouldn't want to stop you.
No, clearly Professor Wilcox likes his dinner. There's no question.
We like our bedtime, so we all have our needs.
Yep.
Okay.
And no one wants to hear about our needs, so.
No.
We're going to wrap it up.
All right.
And please keep asking questions. That's why we're here, and we'd love to see them. And I'd like to thank Professor McClellan and Professor Levesque for a fun-filled evening.
And thank you, Professor Wilcox,
for
for being our host with the
Having
most.
such an entertaining hairstyle tonight.
Yes.
It's like a troll doll if I shake. All right, signing off.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night.